exactly what I'm talking about when I spoke of the multi-year hiring plan and addressing our core services. Our greatest, one of the metrics we look at is response time. And you heard me talk about this last year a lot. This time of year, you're going to hear me talk about it again in media a lot. We've gone from over 22 minutes to 17.5.4 now. But you know, as you ask that question, I can feel exactly the concern, and I don't think anybody in this room is going to say waiting 17.5 minutes for the police to come when somebody's kicking in your front door is a good number. We understand that. We're doing everything we can. All of our deployments of new recruits have been focused to do everything we can to resource our front line. We have looked strategically across the entire service and have actually not backfilled in some other areas so that we can put police officers on the front line. So we have incredible stress building in other areas of our organization so we can resource our front line because we know that's a concern. And listen, I've said this to City Council and I'll say it to you, there is no magic that I can work, even if it rained down all the money in the world on me to create capacity to put cops through the training more than what the province will give us. We are right now at the max because the city supported our budget. I need that continued support. You know, you hear me, I will say that again wherever I go. But there's a limit at the Ontario Police College. This is the practical reality. And why I said to somebody earlier, we can't flick a switch and put a cop in a car. It takes a lot of time and effort, but we are doing everything we can to get that to a better place. I hope to be here next year and be able to tell you a better number. But this is the issue.
If I can just make a comment as well. The challenges that the police services are going through as well is because excuse me? Excuse me?
Let the people ask the question.
So the problem that the police services is going through as well, when they go through training and they go through the college and training, the officers get trained, then they go on the street, and what happens is that some of them leave the city of Toronto and they go to other cities because they can make the same amount of money and there's not as much crime in some of these smaller cities. So they have to keep recruiting and keep doing the training, and it goes all round and around, and that's really an issue as well for the police services on keeping the staff that they have without leaving. So next question.
So I've lived in Weston for just over 30 years now, so I'm going to repeat some of the stuff or just piggyback on what's been said. We need representatives from the provincial government and federal government. If children are falling through the gaps, it's because their parents are falling through the gaps. There need to be programs for that. And if we're going to talk about resources being used and utilized, why did this family have to show up with a flyer? If Canadian Tire and Metro can get flyers in my mailbox, so can the police. Same with you, Trustee. If you want to talk about after-school programs, it's at school. How are people outside of school going to know about that? Flyers. Canadian Tire can do it. You guys can do it too. Cover the neighborhood. And they had to make them. That's ridiculous. Councillor, that bridge, that door, it's been talked to you about 1,000,000 times. It does not take this long to fortify a door. Give me the go-ahead. I'll go to Home Depot tomorrow and get the lock and do it for you. If the police, who have had a high incident rate of offenses against officers and injuries, and they're not afraid of police with guns and Kevlar, they're certainly not afraid of us. CCTV is not going to cut it. Everybody's got Ring cameras and security. Why are we not doing community policing, trying to reinvent it and bring in marginalized communities? We can do it better in Weston. Maybe we can be the role model for other places. Get people on the street. This is a way to engage the youth, rebuild the trust with the police, rebuild the trust with the community, and maybe get the kids, and maybe that woman who said about her husband, then the police will know who her husband is because they're walking around the neighborhood, and maybe they'll smile at him a little bit more. There's ways for us to do this. Weston can be the test ground for other communities. We've got a very active community here. There's ways for us to do this, to all work together, keep the community safe, keep the police safe.
So we said 2 more questions, and I just want to say that we have a very active community in Weston. We have the Weston Village Residents Association that's doing a lot of engage. Please stop interrupting. Please stop interrupting. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a very active residents association that there's a lot of community events that are being organized. We're engaging the community, and there's a lot happening in Weston where the community is very much involved. And we want more community members to join us on what we're doing in Weston, because
how are we supposed to join? If you don't let us join and select it, join the residents association, how are we supposed to join?
will you stop interrupting, please? Thank you. Please, I did say at the beginning of the meeting to be respectful. I did say that. Okay, one last question and then we're going to adjourn. One last question. But this is the last question. Last question.
My name is Daniel DeGiorgio. I'm the Catholic school trustee for the area. Just quickly, thank you to everyone on stage. Thank you to the officers at the front, at the back. I know you guys do what you can with the limited resources. I just came from St. Bernard School, beautiful community, community barbecue. So unfortunately, there were 2 recent shootings in Jane and Lawrence. I've heard multiple different things when it comes to what the increased response is when there's a shooting around a school. So I'd like to hear from TPS with respect to what exactly happens when there's multiple shootings and there's a school nearby. What happens in and around that school?
I'll speak to this one specifically because I've been involved in it. So we had, I believe, September 1st, we had a homicide, I think where I might be a couple of days off. September 2nd, we had a shooting in the morning, and September 2nd in the evening, we had a shooting in the school parking lot. I believe that's what you're speaking about. We immediately engaged with Safe Schools, or sorry, Safe TO, which is City of Toronto run organization, and had meetings with the Safe TO councillors, as well as the Toronto Catholic School Board principal from that location and trustee as well. The officers were deployed from the police portion. Officers were deployed before school, during school, and after school. They were told to be there in uniform capacity and engage with the members of the community. That was to allow them the opportunity to speak to us if they had any information, but even more so just to make them feel safe. Safe TO engaged right inside the schools, were available for counselors, counseling programs, and were able to provide some of the high schools, some of the grade schools, alternate programming that was available to them to assist with programs that were available free of charge for them to help them cope with the trauma that was going on. As far as the police aspect, we continued those enhanced patrols for the first month of school, just making sure that everybody felt safe. And it wasn't until we saw the analytics said that that problem had simmered down for the time being, that we're able to start to pull back resources and make people be able to be with a lessened uniform presence in front of them.
So I appreciate that response, and I would also appreciate you personally keeping an eye on the situation at Jane and Lawrence in the immediate future. And my second question, you actually segued it beautifully into it, is the analytics. So I can't remember the exact number, but you guys said X amount of officers were added to York South-Weston. What was that number?
It wasn't to York South-Weston, sorry, it was to 12 Division General. And
that's okay.
Yes.
So everyone always hears there's limited budgets. I know Councilor Nunziata, I know Liban, they're doing what they can with respect to money. I do it every day, I understand. But my concern as a resident of York South, where I've lived all the time, is how do we know that York South is getting an increased proportionate, like Etobicoke, for example. If we only see York South in isolation, we don't necessarily know that we're getting treated fairly with respect to the increased resources. Because I know we're getting increased resources, but I'd just like to make sure that it's a real increase proportionate to the crime, personally. So thank you. And then I got 24 seconds, and I'm just gonna ask that they get my remaining 24, please. I know it's breaking the rules, but no problem.
So just quickly,
just quickly to answer that question. So the deployment of our resources has become a real priority for us. And as the Chief mentioned, we have 4 deployments now of 90 officers. So where we put those officers is completely intelligence driven, like you said, but a lot of it looks at the type of crimes we're having in certain areas, the length of time that we're on those, the amount of calls each officer takes. But to your point, it makes such a difference to have those additional officers. So to Superintendent Fernandez's point, she showed you the slide that added 20 officers to 12 Division. Well, they've done a tremendous job with those 20 officers because they've cut their response time in 12 Division by almost 30%. They were over 22 minutes a year ago. They're now one of the best in the city at just over 16 minutes. So having those additional officers help, but to your point, the proper deployment, and right now we're engaged in further third-party research with Environics and different companies to try to get those answers, to get those numbers on exactly how many resources we need, which the sticker shock is, it's tough for a city council to swallow, but these additional officers are making a huge difference.
Thank you very much.
So everyone, the question I know was directed at police, but one of the things we found at the school district when traumatic incidents like this happen is that students and families need additional supports beyond just the police. So one of the things that is critically important, and I know when we're going to speak for Toronto District School Board, is that the deployment of support staff to schools in the aftermath of these incidents is intensive. So schools that experience these types of incidents are flooded with social workers, child and youth workers, and support staff for both parents, students, and staff. Because experiencing these incidents, we have often found when something happens in the schoolyard, the children who are impacted are right in that school beyond those doors. So aside from the excellent service that Toronto Police is able to provide, we think it's just as important to add the social supports in times of crisis and trauma as well.
Okay, before we go to the last question, the woman that was up here earlier and talked about the door, I don't know if you're aware, but that door has been padlocked by Metrolink, so it's been closed for 2 weeks. Last question.
We'll kind of do a 2-for-1. I just will be brief, but I am Tanir's neighbor. I also have a teenage son, and so this is deeply upsetting for me that he's still missing after a month. Also, I was home the day that he went missing. So was my husband. I have a camera, I have a home monitoring system. Nobody knocked on my door. Nobody knocked on my neighbor's door to ask to see their camera footage, and now it's too late. So we don't even know if somebody caught it on camera. We don't know if there was evidence, because nobody asked for it, and we did ask. We asked our neighbors who have cameras if anyone had knocked, and no one even knocked. So that deeply concerns me, that at some level early on in this investigation that it wasn't taken as seriously as it should have been. And I can tell you, Tamir's a great kid. He didn't deserve this.
Thank you.
One more question.
Okay, one last question, please. And if you can just ask your question.
Sure, I'd love to ask my question. I too am a neighbor of Tanir's, and I can attest I never met his family until he went missing. He was a lovely, intelligent, warm, outgoing young man. I don't have children, but I too was never asked anything, and I'm deeply disturbed that he's missing. So my question is, the police indicate that, quote, concern for his safety. I know you don't always say that when children are missing. So I'd like to know what the criteria is for that. And also, perhaps Fighter can answer this question. I feel that his friends know something, and as I think the investigating officer indicated earlier, it's been challenging getting information. What can we do as a community to encourage younger people? I understand their fear, but. And finally, I'll just make one last, while you're thinking of the answer, just want to let people know that the city budget discussions start. So If you have concerns about funding for policing, for example, school safety, now's the time to go to your councillor and public meetings to express those concerns.
So the first part of this question was directly about an ongoing investigation and why you weren't asked, correct? I'd have to look into the specifics of that investigation with which buildings were canvassed and which buildings weren't. It's my understanding that we do have some video within it, but I will not be going into the specifics of the investigation in this forum, okay? If you want to talk about how we get students or young people to come forward to provide different information, I'll pass this off to Spider to answer that. No.
No, I did that. I think you answered it. Okay, that was it for the questions. I want to thank everyone for coming out and that participated. I want to thank Chief Myron Demkiw, Liban Hassan, and all the police officers that are up here. Spider Jones, thank you very much for being here. You're an inspiration. And our neighborhood officers at the back. I wanted an opportunity for everybody to ask a question, and they had that opportunity. And I think what's really important is this is not just a policing issue. We're all in it together, and we should work together with the community, with the police, with the school, because that's the only way that we'll solve and we'll make York Southwestern 12th Division a safer community. And I need your support. I need your support in helping me do that, working with the police and working with the school board. As well as I mentioned, I have the motion going through for bail reform. If you can do a petition for me so we can lobby the federal and provincial government on that, I think that's very important, because a lot of the crime that's happening in the city and in York Southwestern are repeat offenders. There are people that have committed shooting 2, 3, 4 times on bail the next day. That's my concern, and that's why I'm moving my motion through for bail reform. I know the chief supports and the Police Services Board endorsed it as well. Thank you again for attending. Have a good evening.